Welcome to the new Employee Safety Orientation, which will provide basic health and safety information to employees. The Wake Forest University Department of Environmental Health and Safety is charged with assuring the university is in compliance with all pertinent laws administered by over a half dozen different governmental regulatory agencies. Click on the icon for more information about each agency. Hazard communication. In order to ensure chemical safety in the workplace, information about the identities and hazards of chemicals must be available and understandable to workers. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard requires the development and dissemination of such information. Step 1 in hazard communication. Know what chemicals are present in the work area. Ask your supervisor what and where chemicals are stored in your work area. An overall campus inventory is maintained online. Ask to see the inventory before you begin. Step 2. Read and understand the safety data sheet. Prior to using a chemical, be sure to read and understand the information in the Safety Data Sheet, or SDS. An online SDS database is available on the EHS website. Step 3. Take proper precautions to protect against exposure. Be sure to wear the proper personal protective equipment, or PPE, when using a chemical. The SDS will designate the type to be worn. Step 4. Know the physical hazards of the chemical you are using. Understand the potential risks from fire, toxicity, and reactivity, and any precautions that you should take prior to chemical use. Step 5. Proper handling and storage. All chemicals must be labeled appropriately, including the chemical name, the chemical hazard, and contact information. Never store incompatible chemicals together, and make sure all flammables are kept away from sources of ignition. Lastly, Step 6, emergency procedures. Always know the proper steps to take in the event of a spill or release of a chemical. Follow the flow chart as described here. Bloodborne pathogen exposure control. Employees incur risk each time they are exposed to blood or other potentially infectious materials. Any exposure incident may result in infection and subsequent illness. Considering the possibility of becoming infected from a single exposure incident, exposure incidents must be prevented whenever possible. The goal of the bloodborne pathogen standard is to reduce the significant risk of infection. Step 1. Eliminate risk. Wake Forest University makes every effort to eliminate or minimize occupational exposure to blood and other potentially infectious materials. Step 2. Provide the hepatitis B vaccine and medical follow-up. Hepatitis B vaccine and vaccination series are offered to all employees who have occupational exposure, and post-exposure evaluation and follow-up are required for all employees who have had an exposure incident. Human Resources will establish and maintain an accurate record for each employee with occupational exposure in accordance with 29 CFR 1910.20. Step 3. Universal precautions. Universal precautions will be observed by all university employees to prevent contact with blood and other potentially infectious materials. Under circumstances in which differentiation between body fluid types is difficult or impossible, all body fluids will be considered potentially infectious. Universal precautions are accomplished through engineering controls, work practice controls, personal protective equipment, and housekeeping. Step 4. Communication of hazards to employees. Efforts directing and communicating hazards of bloodborne pathogens to university employees through the use of labels, signs, and information and training are intended to provide employees with adequate warning to eliminate or minimize their exposure. Labels and signs may be obtained through the Environmental Health and Safety Department. Asbestos. Asbestos is a mineral fiber found in rocks. There are several kinds of asbestos fibers, all of which are fire resistant and not easily destroyed or degraded by natural processes. Uses of asbestos. Asbestos has been used in a wide variety of household and building materials, such as pipe and boiler insulation, floor tile and mastic, wall and ceiling materials such as decorative and acoustical plasters or tiles, and exterior siding and roofing materials. Asbestos dangers. Asbestos has been shown to cause cancer of the lung and lining of the lung, mesothelioma, as well as other non-cancerous lung diseases. Some asbestos materials can break into small fibers, which can get into the air and be breathed in. Once inhaled, fibers can become lodged in lung tissue for a long time. After many years, typically 15 to 40, asbestos-related diseases can develop. Asbestos exposure prevention. Asbestos exposure can be prevented by maintaining materials in intact and sealed condition. When asbestos must be disturbed, as in renovation and repair operations, a combination of engineering controls, containment and ventilation, and dust suppression methods, wetting, and other work practices can prevent exposure to building occupants and minimize exposure to abatement workers. Wake Forest University hires licensed, qualified contractors to perform abatement work on campus. Wake Forest also certifies employees to oversee the work of the abatement contractor to ensure that all controls are adequately implemented. These employees perform inspections and sampling on a regular basis throughout the duration of the abatement. Mold. Molds are microscopic organisms found everywhere in the environment, indoors and outdoors. When present in large quantities, molds have the potential to cause adverse health effects. Recognizing mold. Mold is usually recognized by sight, appearing as colored woolly mats, and by smell, often producing a foul, musty, earthy smell. Health effects of mold exposure. For individuals allergic to mold spores, symptoms are typically mild and include sneezing, runny nose, and eye irritation. Those at greater risk of health effects include individuals with allergies, asthma, or other lung diseases, and those with weakened immune systems. Mold growth prevention. The best way to prevent mold growth is to stop water intrusion within buildings at its source. Report all leaks, standing water, and other signs of potential water intrusion immediately to facilities and campus services customer service. Fire and life safety. Know your evacuation routes. Pay attention to posted building evacuation routes. It is always good to have at least 2 escape routes. Maintain clear egress. Don't store anything in hallways and make sure not to block exits. Fire doors are not to be propped open, and make sure there is 3 feet of open space on either side of mounted fire extinguishers. In case of fire, if you see smoke or fire in a building, pull the fire alarm and then evacuate. Call University Police at extension 5911 to report the fire. Only use a fire extinguisher if you are not in immediate danger. Fire extinguishers. If using a fire extinguisher, pull the fire alarm and make sure your back is to an exit. Remember the word pass. Pull the pin, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the handle, and sweep back and forth. If the fire is not quickly extinguished, evacuate the building. Basic electrical safety. Permanent use of extension cords is prohibited. Instead, use a power strip with a surge protector. Do not reset tripped breakers in buildings. Call facilities and campus services customer service to have all breakers reset. Combustible storage. All combustible materials such as paper and cardboard must be stored at least 24 inches from ceilings. Portable heaters must be UL listed and may not have an exposed heating element. Heaters must have an automatic tip-over feature that shuts the unit off if it is knocked over. Candles and plug-in air fresheners are not allowed. Medical emergencies. Anytime there is a fire or medical emergency, always dial extension 5911 from a campus phone or 911 from a cell phone. Care for the injured. In case of injuries, never leave the victim alone. Send another individual to meet medical responders and bring them to the location of the victim. Make sure the victim is comfortable, if possible, and only if it will not cause further injury. Speaking with 911. When speaking with the 911 dispatcher, always provide the building, floor, and room number if applicable. Automated external defibrillator. Many buildings on campus are equipped with automated external defibrillators, or AEDs. Locations will be designated with an appropriate sign. The EHS website also has a map with all locations on campus. Reporting injuries. All injuries must be reported on a first report of injury form available on the Human Resources website. Your supervisor must complete the form with your assistance if possible and provide a copy to Human Resources. Accidents and incidents, such as spills of chemicals, must also be reported. In the event of an incident or accident, complete the first report of incident form located on the EHS website and provide a copy to the EHS office. Inclement weather. Wake Alert. The Wake Alert website is the primary information source during an emergency at Wake Forest. Updates and information will appear on the Wake Alert website. Severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. Always be aware of potentially hazardous weather conditions. In the event of a severe thunderstorm or tornado, seek shelter indoors immediately. Go to the lowest floor of the building and the innermost room or corridor. Stay away from windows. Our goal. Through careful planning and collaborative effort, Wake Forest University has worked diligently to prevent workplace injuries and illness, environmental incidents, and damage or loss of property. We ask each member of the university community to focus daily on making Wake Forest University a safe and healthy community for all to enjoy.